Welcome to Dialogues for Change. Life is not a void to be filled. It is a plenitude to be discovered. Today, I would like to share with you some very thought-provoking thoughts by Ashis Nandy, taken from his book, The Intimate Enemy, that was republished with two other books, At the Age of Psychology and Creating a Nationality, in this collection called Exiled at Home. His thoughts I will share with you on the question of colonialism and resistance to colonialism in the contemporary setting. This book takes the idea of psychological resistance to colonialism seriously. But that implies some new responsibilities too. Today, when westernization has become a pejorative word, there have reappeared on the stage subtler and more sophisticated means of acculturation. They produce not merely models of conformity, but also models of official dissent. It is possible today to be anti-colonial in a way which is specified and promoted by the modern worldview as proper, sane, and rational. Even when in opposition, that dissent remains predictable and controlled. It is also possible today to opt for a non-West, which itself is a construction of the West. One can then choose between being the Orientalist despot, to combine Karl Wittfogel with Edward Said, and the revolutionary loving subject, to combine Camus with George Orwell. And for those who do not like the choice, there is, of course, Cecil Rhodes and Rudyard Kipling's noble, half-savage, half-child, compared to whom the much-hated Brown Sahib seems more brown than Sahib. Even in enmity, these choices remain forms of homage to the victors. Let us not forget that the most violent denunciation of the West, produced by Frantz Fanon, is written in the elegant style of Jean-Paul Sartre. The West has not merely produced modern colonialism, it informs most interpretations of colonialism. It colors even this interpretation of interpretation. I have said at the beginning that these pages justify innocence. This statement should be amplified in a world where the rhetoric of progress uses the fact of internal colonialism to subvert the cultures of societies subject to external colonialism, and where the internal colonialism in turn uses the fact of external threat to legitimize and perpetuate itself. It is, however, also a world where the awareness has grown that neither form of oppression can be eliminated without eliminating the other. In the following pages, I have in mind something like the authentic innocence psychoanalyst Rollo May speaks about. The innocence which includes the vulnerability of a child, but which has not lost the realism of its perception of evil, or that of its own complicity with that evil. It was that innocence which finally defeated colonialism, however much the modern mind might like to give the credit to world historical forces, internal contradictions of capitalism, and to the political horse sense or voluntary self-liquidations of the rulers. But the meek inherit the earth not by meekness alone. They have to have categories, concepts, and even defenses of mind with which to turn the West into a reasonably manageable vector within the traditional worldviews still outside the span of modern ideas of universalism. The first concept in such a set has to be the victim's construction of the West. A West which would make sense to the non-West in terms of the non-West's experience of suffering. However jejune such a concept may seem to the sophisticated scholar, it is a reality for the millions who have learned the hard way to live with the West during the last 2 centuries. And everything said, that alternative construction of the West is not so unsophisticated after all. If there is the non-West which constantly invites one to be Western and to defeat the West on the strength of one's acquired Westernness, there is the non-West's construction of the West which invites one to be true to the West's other self, and to the non-West which is in alliance with that other self. If beating the West at its own game is the preferred means of handling the feelings of self-hatred in the modernized non-West, there is also the West constructed by the savage outsider, who is neither willing to be a player nor a counter-player. Those other Wests too I have tried to capture in these pages. In this connection, if while translating and commenting on their Wests, these outsiders have smuggled in their own imaginaries, myths and fantasies, I have connived at it. That is the way translations and commentaries are traditionally made in some societies. Fidelity to one's inner self as one translates, and to one's inner voice when one comments, may not mean adherence to reality in some cultures, but in some others they do. At least that is the sole defense I have for my tendency to speak of the West as a single political entity, of Hinduism as Indianness, or of history and Christianity as Western. None of them is true, but all of them are realities. I like to believe that each such concept in this work is a double entendre. On the one hand, it is part of an oppressive structure. On the other, it is in league with its victims. Thus, the West is not merely a part of an imperial worldview. Its classical traditions and its critical self are sometimes a protest against the modern West. Similarly, Hinduism is Indianness the way V.S. Naipaul speaks of it, and Hinduism could be Indianness the way Rabindranath Tagore actualized it. At one time, these could be ignored as trivialities. Today, these differences have become clues to survival. Especially so when the modern West has produced not only its servile imitators and admirers, but also its circus-tamed opponents and its tragic counterplayers performing the last gladiator-like acts of courage in front of appreciative Caesars. The essays in this book are a paean to the non-players who construct a West which allows them to live with the alternative West, while resisting the loving embrace of the West's dominant self. It's a very thought-provoking book on the very subtle internal effects of colonialism and on the challenge of decolonizing our minds. And I do very much think that this decolonization process of our minds is not only something to be carried out by those who have been physically colonized by Western cultures, but by all of us who to some degree or another have been colonized by the modern worldview. So we should appreciate what is to be appreciated, but we should also be critical of some things that may be put into question and changed. I hope that these thought-provoking thoughts inspired you on this Thursday, 14th of June 2012. Thank you.